Apostasy by Deydralinne, Ch.3. A mutually beneficial opportunity. There was a 30-second period when the Death Eaters surrounding them were so shocked by their appearance that no one moved, just stared at them. Or perhaps they were waiting to see if more members of the Order were going to be joining them. Then finally, people seemed to jolt to life. A dozen wands were pointed at them, but only one person actually fired a hex their way. Hermione was faster, though. She saw the process on his face and quickly stabbed the blade of the combat knife into the shoulder of the closest Death Eater, using the shock of the impact to yank the man in front of her and Ginny, just in time to take the hit for them. Hermione raised an eyebrow and peeked her head out from behind the man. "Well, that was rude. I don't even have a wand, and my girl here doesn't have hers drawn." Realistically, she knew the rings would have protected them, but she was waiting for the reveal on that one. Confused faces looked back at her. Most notable were the faces of Theodore Nott, Blaise Zabini, and Draco Malfoy, who now stood rather than sat and were clearly assessing them for threats. Hermione let an incapacitated Death Eater fall to the floor. "Honestly, if we wanted to fight, half of you would be dead already," Hermione mumbled as she wiped the blood of her knife on the denim covering her thighs. "Why are you here?" Blaise eyed the unconscious man on the floor before looking between them, the majority of the Death Eaters in the place eyeing their 3 former schoolmates nervously. It was no secret how high in the ranks the former Slytherins had risen. A few of the older, more bloodthirsty Death Eaters looked outraged that he was even bothering to ask. "Who cares? Kill the bitches! Avada Kedavra!" An older man shouted in annoyance, but the man dropped dead before he had a chance to finish the curse. Draco Malfoy's wand pointed at the corpse, his face pinched in disgust. "We told you we're here for a drink," Ginny exclaimed, a little too bubbly. Draco's eyes flitted past them to the barkeep behind her, and Ginny a small singular nod of his head. Behind her, Hermione heard 2 glasses being slapped down on the bench and a bottle being uncapped. "You have 2 minutes to start talking before I will gladly deliver you to the Dark Lord." Ginny started laughing, and in a bold move, turned her back to collect the glasses. Hermione's eyes darted around the bar, making sure that no one would shoot while she was vulnerable. But then she was back and pressing up a glass of whiskey into Hermione's hand, a sip for good measure before she spoke. "We thought you would be interested to know that we will no longer be providing our services to the Order," Hermione spoke with a cool indifference. Another Death Eater she recognized as Marcus Flint barked a laugh. "You expect us to believe that rubbish?" He snarled, his teeth curling to expose the most disgusting set of rotting teeth that Hermione had the misfortune to see for some time. "We don't really give a damn if you believe it, Flint," Ginny smiled tightly his way. "You're hardly high enough in the ranks to warrant us caring of your opinion." Theodore Nott scoffed a laugh. "You're nearly out of time, ladies." Hermione rolled her eyes. "I know that you lot need things spelt out for you, but honestly, do you try to keep up?" She smirked as Draco's eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched. She knew full well that these 3 in particular needed nothing spelt out for them. "We have left the Order and have decided instead to freelance our skill sets to more appreciative parties. We thought we would offer our Lord and Master first opportunity. Or we could just kill you," Blaise glowered. "That would be ill-advised." Ginny sighed with boredom, choosing to lean against the bar stool, one elbow resting on the table and the other bending to bring her drink to her lips. "So is walking into a bar full of people ready to murder you, sweetheart." Blaise's eyes glittered with amusement. "So a mudblood and a blood traitor have come to what? Join the Death Eaters?" Draco drawled disbelievingly. "We have no interest in taking the mark before you go getting the wrong idea." Hermione looked out the window into Diagon Alley, now vastly different than it had been 10 years ago. "We grow tired of our skills being undervalued and rejected. If your King Snake Man would appreciate them more, then we will gladly provide them. Otherwise, we will be on our way." "You will be going nowhere, you filthy mudblood bitch," Tiberius Nott spat. Hermione raised an eyebrow at him. "I think you will find that you have no way to stop us. A killing curse between those perky little tits of yours would do the job. McNair would probably enjoy having some time with your body afterwards. He tends to favor the less lively holes." It was clear the old bastard was trying to intimidate her, but it just made her smile bigger. Hermione took a sip of her whiskey, stepping slowly toward the man, several surrounding Death Eaters pointing their wands with a stronger intention. "My," Ginny warned cautiously from the bar. Hermione didn't stop her steps, though, until she was up close and personal. The elder Nott stared down at her with contempt. Hermione smirked, looking him up and down. "Yeah, I can see it." "See what?" Tiberius Nott rose to debate. "Why your son has surpassed you." Several deep gasps sounded throughout the room. Tiberius looked as though Hermione had spat at him. His face grew redder and redder as each second passed, and he failed to find words. "You're not very intimidating, are you? I mean, really, a generic death threat? You couldn't even get a decent slicing hex off on Jen earlier. Barely scratched her, and honestly, who cares what happens after I'm dead? It's not like I'm going to feel his tiny prick, dead or alive. Hermione batted her lashes at him, offering him a tight, challenging smile. Fucking hell, she heard Blaise exhale from a few feet away. My, Ginny sighed. Tiberius was still spluttering through his rage, unable to put his words to feelings, shaking so badly that he looked as though he might start whizzing around the room like a shaken bottle of soda. Hermione took a few smug steps back before turning back toward the redhead at the bar. Ginny had a mildly amused smile, but she also shook her head and rolled her eyes at Hermione to let her know that she was treading dangerously. Fuck it, you want to roll? Let's roll. Draco downed his drink, nodding to Blaise and Theo, who stepped toward them. Ginny groaned and swallowed down the rest of her own drink just in time for Blaise to reach the redhead. I'm going to need your wand, little Deydralinne, for where we are going. He held his hand out expectantly. His words might have been gentle, but his face was hard and pinched. Ginny smirked, but handed it over. Draco twirled his finger at Hermione, who complied and put her hands behind her back. Careful there, Malfoy. She likes to be restrained, Ginny laughed, jumping off the bar stool and turning to offer her own wrist to Blaise behind her back. Hermione knew they could be in a little bit of trouble here, but Ginny's mood was infectious, and she knew that no matter what, the two would find a way out of whatever tricky situation they were getting themselves into. The tricky situation was a large stone manor. It stood on a hill overlooking the village. Some of the windows boarded, tiles missing from its roofs, and ivy spreading unchecked over its face. Hermione was briefly overcome by the sight of the building in front of them, before she and Ginny were prodded forward. "Welcome to Riddle Manor," Theo said, his voice portraying his excitement for his entertainment that was no doubt to come. Riddle Manor, this must have been Voldemort's family home. The wind blowing over the hillside was the only welcome they would get there. Not even Ginny offered a smart-ass comment as they trudged up the stone stairs, the enormous wooden door folding inward. For all the grandiose feel of the outside, the inside was particularly bare of furnishings. In the foyer, a large statue covered by a white drop cloth was the only item. In the hallway were the marks of where paintings once stood. In the ballroom that they were led into stood two antique dining chairs, the deep red curtains pushed open to allow the sunlight to flood the otherwise empty tan and cream-colored hall. Voldemort stood in the center of the room, his back to them, his black robes falling loosely around him, talking to Bellatrix Lestrange and her husband Rodolphus, both of whom looked at the group in utter surprise. This is not what she anticipated Voldemort's home to look like. She supposed she was expecting black, damp decor with a few piles of bodies thrown in for good measure. "My lord," Draco dipped his head to the snake-like man, who snapped his attention to them the moment Draco spoke. A low hiss sounded from him as he took in the sight of Ginny and Hermione, whom the boys had let go of, their hands now free once more. Hermione ignored him, though, instead choosing to look around him in curiosity. "Go, my boy. Who have you brought me?" His voice was quiet. Hermione Granger and Ginevra Weasley. Beside her, Ginny made a sound of disgust at her full first name, and even despite the situation, Hermione scoffed a laugh at her friend's reaction. Their lack of trembling fear seemed to confuse the dark wizard in front of them, who floated towards them, a scowl on his face. "Is there something amusing you wish to share, Mudblood?" Hermione rolled her eyes at his jaded insult. Only Ginny's aversion to her full name. Voldemort didn't seem to know what to make of her. Well done, Draco. Your capture of these two will be... Respectfully, my lord, we did not capture them." Voldemort frowned. "Very well. I appreciate your honesty. Name my loyal followers so I may reward them with my gratitude." Draco seemed nervous to disclose the truth, so Ginny helped him out. "Oh, good Morgana, man. No one captured us. We requested an audience." Ginny rolled her eyes and threw herself haphazardly into one of the dining chairs. Hermione, on the other hand, strolled towards the large arched window nearby to look down at the gardens below. Their actions and casual demeanor simultaneously made the three Slytherin boys nervous and greatly offended Bellatrix Lestrange. Voldemort obviously had not had someone treat him with any level of disregard for a long time. "And what is the purpose of this audience?" He finally managed, his annoyance evident. "Well, Voldy, can I call you Voldy?" Hermione started. "No," he snarled. "Well, Voldy, we have come." "How dare you," Voldemort hissed. "You should remember your place, Mudblood." He raised his wand. Ginny scoffed. Hermione smiled in amusement. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she whined. "Crucio," Voldemort barked, but it wasn't Hermione who dropped in pain. Voldemort himself fell to the ground. A pain gasp escaped him. Hermione was now glad to have waited to give away their source of protection. While Ginny looked away to hide her proud smirk, Hermione feared it would fail. Ginny had been possibly a little overconfident in her invention. The rings were a set because they encompassed a mirror enchantment. One without the other was useless, but together they would bounce any hex or curse thrown their way back at the caster. They wouldn't work for anyone, obviously. It had required both hers and Ginny's blood to activate. They were linked to them specifically and drenched in deep, dark magic. Voldemort's back arched off the floor as he writhed through the pain. Bellatrix woke from her horror with a start, raising her wand to Hermione and screeching at her, "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it at once, you insolent brat! How dare you!" Hermione shrugged her shoulders. "I'm not doing anything, Bella." Once upon a time, Bella had haunted her dreams, leaving her shaking and terrified of coming face to face with the eldest Black sister. But those fears had long since passed, probably around the same time Hermione had begun to lose her humanity. Everyone in the room was looking at her in various degrees of confusion, with the exception of Ginny, who was watching Voldemort with a twisted level of amusement. "I said stop it!" Bellatrix's eyes darted between her master and Hermione. When the Crucio didn't ease up, she raised her wand at the witch. "Crucio!" she screamed at Hermione. But the moment later, Bellatrix was in the same position as Voldemort. "What the hell?" Rodolphus shouted, his eyes narrowing on Ginny, deciding that she must be the source of his master and wife's suffering. "Bombarda!" The man flew backwards across the ballroom by an invisible force, his body colliding with a large marble pillar, his body falling to a heap on the ground. "Oh, for goodness sake," Hermione huffed. "Just let go of your wands," she snapped before turning to look at the window again. Voldemort let go of his immediately, and the curse dispersed. He lay there, panting, as the residual pain no doubt lingered. Bellatrix, however, seemed unwilling to trust Hermione's word and continued to writhe in pain. Hermione rolled her eyes at the stupidity of the woman. "Granger, what the hell?" Draco snarled, stepping towards her, his anger palpable. Hermione cocked an eyebrow at him. "Ginny told him that it wasn't wise. Honestly, Malfoy, we might be here to offer services, but we aren't stupid. We're not walking in here with one wand between us and a death wish." "I don't know. That was pretty fucking stupid if you ask me," Blaise muttered. "Well, we didn't ask you," Ginny retorted, now examining her nails. Voldemort continued to lie on the ground, his limbs twitching occasionally as he stared at the domed ceiling above him. "Explain before I kill you myself," Draco hissed. Ginny sighed loudly, throwing her head back in frustration. "As we've both stated on several occasions now, that it would be ill-advised. Unless your goal is to end your own life, that is. In which case, be my guest." "That's the problem with you lot," Hermione huffed and began to walk the perimeter of the ballroom, putting more and more space between herself and the Death Eaters. Her eyes roamed over the textured wallpaper. "You have no ambition, no drive. You don't see the big picture, which frankly, considering each of you were Slytherins, is rather ironic." "What picture?" Voldemort hissed from his place on the floor. "I'm so glad you asked, Voldy. You have a vendetta against Muggleborns, but it is misplaced. I mean, think about it, really. Harry Potter hasn't defeated you. It was Lily, a Muggleborn witch, that caused you to fail last time." Hermione's voice rose as she strolled past the body of Bellatrix, still crying out in pain but gripping firm to her wand. Draco had clearly grown weary of the cries, too, as he waved his hand and silenced her wordlessly. Impressive. Just now, it was me who ensured our safety, which resulted in your self-inflicted pain. How many of your men have I killed? Your desire to eradicate Muggles is pointless and frankly futile because Muggleborn witches and wizards are going to continue to be born. Witches or wizards like myself, like Lily Potter, who are smart and if brought on side, could be a game changer for you. But instead, you're stuck. The war hasn't moved in 7 years because you have no direction. Hermione ignored Bellatrix's flailing body, her mouth open in silent screams, tears leaking out of the corner of her eyes. If anything, her self-imposed punishment was karma. A much more realistic goal, and one certainly more attainable, would be to step out of the shadows around the world. Magical folk no longer needed to hide for the sensitivity of Muggles. Worldwide domination of a different kind. I mean, you, yourself, are half-blood, Voldy. You can hide behind your notions of blood supremacy if you like, but at the end of the day, those of us with half a brain can all see it comes down to an insecurity of your place in the world. An insecurity that you will find a lot of Muggleborns can relate to. Hermione continued, absent-mindedly pausing her steps to inspect a painting that had survived whatever culling had taken place of the furniture in this manner. It was a small painting depicting a battle between Muggles. Long-term, your current agenda holds no weight. It's temporary. If the Order manages to destroy you, they destroy your work. Your Death Eaters will scatter to the wind like they did last time, and you will have wasted your life, which is honestly kind of pathetic. You have a unique following that you could be harnessing for much more. Yet you're behaving like a child, an idiotic child, who begged his mother for an ice cream only to receive it and watch it melt. Hermione continued her path. Anyway, enough of that. Ginny and I didn't come here to critique you. Though it has been amusing, Ginny added in. Hermione grinned at her. We came to inform you that we have decided to leave the Order. Our skills and experience have been greatly unappreciated for far too long, and we have grown bored of their constant rejections. We have decided to be gracious and offer our abilities to you first and foremost in exchange for certain benefits and privileges, of course. If you decline, that is fine. We will carry on our way. We are so fucking dead, Theo sighed in defeat beneath his breath, but as Hermione had stopped talking, his words were clear. Draco was staring at Hermione in horror, clearly in agreement with Theo's words. Blaise, though, seemed to be mulling over Hermione's words. How do you propose we go about fulfilling your idea, Granger? It's obvious, isn't it? Ginny answered for her. Voldemort finally seemed to have regained control of his muscles and pulled himself into the remaining dining chair. Well, then, pretend it's not. You need to shift to a political approach rather than a barbaric warfare nonsense you have going on. Do you want England for a few years, or do you want the world forever? Hermione asked, turning back to the painting again as Ginny went back to inspecting her nails. So you would like me to believe that you and Miss Weasley would like to join my ranks and advise me. Is that it? Voldemort asked breathlessly. The reminder that he was not invincible to torture himself seemed to have chilled his earlier anger. Yes and no. We're offering a mutually beneficial opportunity. We have things we can offer you in return for things you can offer us. We would be contracting ourselves to you as individuals, not as marked Death Eaters. Ginny stared the man down with a dismissive glare. Hermione loved that glare. It encompassed Ginny's fiery spirit and take-no-prisoners attitude. Voldemort looked at her for a long time before his eyes roamed to Hermione. He looked at her as if she was a jigsaw and he had yet to solve. His eyes flicked to the three men at the back who, despite their obvious anxiety around the repercussions of bringing them here, stood tall. Finally, his eyes sought Bellatrix, and he growled in annoyance, the witch openly sobbing, and she still clutched at her wand. He stood and made his way to the window Hermione had looked out of earlier, staring into the gardens below, trying to find his answer. Draco, take your aunt and uncle away. I would like to discuss these matters in private. Draco glanced between the two witches briefly before bowing his head. Of course, my lord. Voldemort waited until they had vacated the room before silencing it and turning to face them again. Start at the beginning.